Mentioned how you're working with all promoters at this point with these shows.
Yeah.
There's been indication from actually Dana White that he wants to go ahead and enter into boxing. What do you make of that, and how do you see the UFC coming in and doing the whole boxing thing? How do you see that playing out if it does in fact happen? Because he stated in multiple interviews that he is very interested in promoting boxing shows now.
Well, you know, Dana has come up with a tremendous structure at the UFC. I mean, the success that company has had is, I wouldn't say it's unprecedented, but he's really left his stamp on combat sports. So if he can do what he did with the UFC and with MMA and transition that into the sport of boxing, you know, I think he has a good chance of being successful. You know, it just boxing definitely is a completely different sport than mixed martial arts. I mean, UFC did a pretty good job of creating kind of a monopoly where, you know, they could create their own ratings, they can create their own mandatories, their own titles, and so they could force, unlike in boxing, they could actually force their fighters or dictate to their fighters who was going to fight each other, and that's why you see a lot of exciting fights in the UFC. In boxing, there's many different sanctioning bodies, a lot of different promoters that won't work with each other, TV networks that won't work with each other. So now it's a lot more fractured, and as a lot of people have experienced, a lot of people like to go into the sport of boxing, but then they get frustrated because there is a lot of politics, and it's hard to put on the best shows unless you're working with a lot of other promoters. So, we'll have to see what direction he goes into. I think maybe they got bit by the boxing bug with the McGregor and Mayweather fight. They saw, how big a successful boxing pay-per-view can be, both on the ticketing and the international side and on the pay-per-view side. So, but like I said, Dana's had a lot of success in mixed martial arts, and we'll see what he wants to do if he does also go into boxing.
I don't know. You know what? Here's the thing. I don't know if it's good or bad for boxing, but here's what it'll prove. Even the biggest fighters in MMA have to box in order to make it really big, right? The best fighter in MMA, let's face it, we who know boxing well know that Floyd was carrying him for a while before that fight was over.
Was he though?
Yeah, he was. Oh, come on.
Yeah. If you let MMA fans hear, they'll be like, no.
Oh, fine.
First time I was legitimate.
They want to be a badass, you gotta get in a boxing ring. That's all I have to say. That's my final word on MMA.
UFC is transitioning to boxing. UFC.
Of course.
Did it surprise you?
No, not at all. Because again, it's, as much as they've accomplished, and it's a great deal, they've never been able to put together a pay-per-view event like the one they had with a fighter. That's just a fact.
So you think it's the money, they saw the money that boxing is,
of course they did.
And that's all
And
that it's about.
If they can help bring the fight into the mainstream, God bless them. I hope they do a great job. They'll make more ways for me to make money too, because I know what I'm doing.
Would it be a smart move for them to actually make Oscar McGregor the UFC boxing banner, just to make a quick impact and splash into the scene, a quick statement, and we're here to make big fights, and McGregor is a part of it?
I can't speak to what's good for them.
As a promoter, if you're in their shoes, as a promoter, it will make sense that you use McGregor
I'm
again
in
in
their
boxing.
shoes. I would have never made McGregor and Mayweather because I think they crossed the line when they did that. And I think that, again, the badasses are in boxing. I think that got proven.
Yeah.
And, the whole thing about MMA was it had that mystique, and I think they were very smart in the beginning to just never cross over. When they finally did it, they're in a situation now where they're talking about doing it again. That's probably not great for their business model, but that's, again, not permitted to say.
Would you be willing to work with them if they approach
Sure.
you? Yeah? So there's not because I know
Conor McGregor
it
wants
has
to
been
fight
met with
Sergey
some
Kovalev.
resistance.
We won't be there. Don't worry about it.
But it has been met with some resistance. Some have a notion where like, oh, they're really difficult to deal with.
I do different.
Dana White.
Brilliant. I saw a couple of media said to me yesterday, some people in boxing aren't very happy that Dana White's coming into boxing. It's like, why? He's a great promoter. He's revolutionised mixed martial arts and obviously the UFC brand. I would love to see Dana White in boxing. I'd love to work with him. I think it's great news for boxing. The more people in the sport, the merrier. So good luck, Dana White.
Stephen, another thing that's happening in the world of combat sports in general, on the success of the Mayweather-McGregor fight, which did about 4.4 million pay-per-view buys, hugely successful event. But now we're seeing Dana showing interest in entering into boxing. What do you make of that?
I think, I think it's an interesting move. Dana's always been a fan. He hasn't always spoken positively of the sport, but he's been involved in the sport for 20 plus years in some way or the other. I think what they saw firsthand and got a reminder of is how big boxing can be, and how passionate the audience is, how diverse, how young the audience is, and anyone who experienced any piece of Mayweather-McGregor and didn't walk away saying, look, there's a very passionate boxing base in the U.S., it would really be missing the boat. So I'd welcome him to the sport, just so I welcome anybody in who is, got the best intentions of doing good fights. If he wants to do good fights and develop the sport, and he's willing to work with other people, then, welcome in, happy to have him.
So I know with the promotion, you guys did work together. There was a bit of tension at times during the build-up and even after. So I was wondering, too, as well, if there's a little bit of hesitation or abrasiveness because of what happened in the past. Or do you think, it's a new page, new year, let's go ahead and do it?
Look, at the end of it, it's one of those things, it's sort of like, you're making the sausage, and sometimes, I might rub somebody the wrong way or vice versa. It happens under when you're working in stressful situations and on big time events. So the reality, I don't take away anything from that experience other than we were able to come together in a very short amount of time and do a huge historic event. There are some conflicts in here and there. That's not going to stand in the way of me pursuing any business opportunity.
Dana White is looking to make a move into boxing. Obviously, he was involved in Mayweather McGregor. As a fellow promoter, as a long-standing, established one, what's your thoughts on that? Do you welcome it?
Welcome anybody. I mean, everybody. There's loads of people. Come into boxing, and they're all going to change the landscape. They're all going to do it. It comes in obviously with the benefit of having been in UFC, which is something they had to themselves. But they built it great. They did a fantastic job. But boxing's a different sport, in as much that it's not the company signing up the athletes. You get to mandatory positions. It's more competitive as far as the promotion side of it than UFC is, where it's only just one. It is what it is. It says what it says on the can. It's UFC. It's a very competitive market, and he's a competitive person. I'm sure he'll bring some good. Some of his good ideas and some of the good things that he's done in UFC to the sport.
Do you think that generally boxing could learn a thing or two from UFC, maybe?
They're two different. I mean, promotion's promotion. The difference between UFC and boxing is that in UFC they have a massive marketing budget, because that's the UFC fighters were not on the same level as payments as, say, some of the top boxers were, which obviously means you've got less money to play with. But at the end of the day, he's done fantastically well. Built something from nothing and turned it into a £4 billion business that he sold. So you've got to take your hat off to him.
I just want to wish them all the very best. Good luck. And may they help the sport. May they enhance the sport. But obviously, look, I'm going to focus on what I'm doing, and that's obviously creating the biggest fights I can. And obviously, the biggest star in boxing is Canelo Alvarez, hands down. So, I mean, there's a reason why Golden Boy Promotions, is the best promoter around, is because we know how to build champions.
McGregor be a key component to their success transitioning into boxing? McGregor can be a key component for the UFC boxing to make a transition successfully? Can he be a pawn, like bargaining tool, so to speak?
I don't know. Look. McGregor got stopped by Mayweather. Okay, that's the bottom line. Because of lack of experience. If he fights 6-rounders, 8-rounders, 10-rounders, and fights contenders, can he get better? Absolutely. Can he be a contender? Can he be a champion? Absolutely. But to fight at the elite level right off the bat, yes, it's hard, and I applaud him. But it's impossible to just try to come to the sport of boxing from another sport and try to say, well, I'm gonna conquer it. It's impossible. It's just hard. So, but he did well for himself, and I'm happy for him.
New promoter in town now, Dana White. What'd you make of Dana announcing that he's coming into boxing? And what do you think the landscape or how he will be received in boxing?
Well, I think Dana's record speaks for itself. I think he's very charismatic. He's a terrific guy. He's a smart guy. I always respected Dana, so I wish him and his group the best of luck.
Would you want to work with him? Are you willing to work with him? Do you think it's a positive that he's coming into the sport?
Well, I think it's a tremendous positive, to have somebody like Dana to come into the sport. Dana is, is a fantastic promoter, and I think for him to get into boxing is great news for the sport.
He's mentioned he's been reaching out to promoters, and I'm just kind of curious, has he reached out to you yet?
No, he has not.
Not yet. Okay. Maybe you might get a phone call. Maybe. Last time I spoke,
we actually know each other quite well, and we always respected each other. But I think right now they're sort of like, if you listen to what he says, they're sort of like exploring in what way, shape, or form they want to get involved. So it's not like you mentioned a new promoter in town. They have officially announced their intentions, but they haven't really decided yet in what form or shape or in what way they wanna go about it. I'm sure they're gonna carefully evaluate how they want to get into boxing, if they really want to get into boxing, because it looks easy, but it's not that easy. It's a very competitive market. The TV situation in the United States is still a bit unsettled, and so we'll see. Once Dana properly evaluates the space, meaning boxing, if and in what form he's going to enter it.
Bob, have you heard any more news about Dana White getting any closer to being licensed as a promoter?
Well, I think he would get licensed right away because they certainly have the balance sheet. For me, that would be great. If Dana White started promoting boxing, it would be terrific because it would show what we have now proven, that boxing is not an old man's sport, that our demographics are young. We've been up against them twice, and we're up against them now for the third time, but a level playing field. Free television, ESPN, free television, Fox and FS1. And when it's free and kids, a lot of kids don't have premium television because they can't afford $15 a month. So when we got a level playing field, we beat the pants off them, not only just overall rating, but the demographics that everybody is looking.
So you think?
So you guys, and at some extent everybody in boxing, really played into this demographic, this argument. Boxing is old, only old people watch it, young people don't watch it. It turns out, in the light of day, to be total bullshit, right? And it's not, credit for me. I think if some of the fights that are on Showtime and some of the fights that are on HBO moved to free television, they would get the same result as we did.
Do you see White working with anyone else but
Who
White?
gives a shit with White? He's a piece of crap.
But you just said you welcomed him to the sport.
Yes, because then it's an acknowledgement how strong boxing is. He has a UFC that's cratering, and he needs boxing to save himself.